You have two different email integration models to choose from. You have your direct integration and you have your proxy. Now, if you're thinking about the proxy, you're talking about the Secure Email Gateway, or the SEG. And the SEG comes in two different flavors, Classic and V2. V2 is the new and improved SEG, and both of these items are going to support protecting your backend email management. The whole purpose of the SEG is to do a little bit of heavy lifting in your DMZ or your internal network and determine which devices can or cannot connect to your email management. Now, there's also a couple of other pluses with the SEG. We'll talk about that in just a moment. The direct integration is going to do pretty much the same thing, except for it's not going to be on a physical server. You're going to configure either PowerShell commands on your Microsoft server, or you're going to set up Google APIs and the Google Apps for Work management console. So with direct integration, it's a little bit lighter. Still has the same security, but you're going to configure them to talk directly to your backend systems. Now, if you're trying to figure out which one to use, the Secure Email Gateway, the proxy, or PowerShell commands and Google APIs for direct integration, this is a great chart to take a look at. You can see at the top there's a proxy versus PowerShell and Google. Basically, in a nutshell, the proxy will support older infrastructure and newer infrastructure as well. PowerShell and Google Apps will support newer infrastructure only. You can see here that we only go back to Exchange 2010 for PowerShell, and then of course Google is Google Apps for Work. Now, one thing that we haven't talked about is the key features. So the key features across the board for PowerShell and proxy, and of course Google APIs, are going to be enforcing SSL security, configuring email over the air, blocking unmanaged devices from accessing the network, and customizing compliance policies. But certificate integration is going to be reserved for Microsoft on-premise products only. When we get down to the selling features of the proxy, we're really interested in two things. We are encrypting attachments and we're encrypting hyperlinks. The attachments that you send via email, you can have those attachments sent to the AirWatch content locker. And that content locker is going to allow you to have encrypted attachments and content from email in a secure container. Now, this secure container can be stored on the device, and then of course, if the device is lost or stolen, that content can be revoked, or we can disable access if an individual is trying to access that secure content. With the hyperlinks, we actually changed the prefix of the hyperlink that's sent in the email to AWBS, or AirWatch Browser Secure. And instead of opening up in the native browser on the device, it will only open up in the VMware browser. So two different ways we can help secure the device with email access is by securing the attachments and securing the hyperlinks. Now, there's a couple of other items here, such as blocking unmanaged devices, requiring devices to be encrypted, blocking uncompromised devices, etc., integrating and revoking with certificates. And you see on the right-hand side that there are a variety of backend email infrastructures. We support Google, we support Lotus, Novell, Exchange, Exchange in the cloud, all of the above there. If you really want to take a look at the architecture of a secure email gateway and how it's set up, you can see here on the left-hand side we have a cloud infrastructure if AirWatch is in the cloud, or if you are supporting AirWatch on-premise. Now on the left-hand side, let's take a look at this one first. So you have a device here, and this device is number one. That device enrolls into AirWatch. And AirWatch pushes down a mobile email management profile, an Exchange ActiveSync profile, that says that's configured for the user on that device. And it says, if you want your email, talk to the SEG. And then what we've done is we've actually hidden our Exchange server behind the SEG's IP endpoint. And on the back end, we deliver a list of permissible users and devices to the Secure Email Gateway server. And when that device goes to talk to the SEG to receive email access, it checks against that list that was sent from the AirWatch console. If the device is on that list, then email traffic flows from your email server directly to your device. And that way we can prevent users from manually configuring a email profile on their device. We can only have them access a secure email gateway through a profile that was sent from the AirWatch console. Now, if we look on the on-premise side, well, we just don't have to have those commands come through the cloud. So you don't have to have a list of permissible devices coming through the public internet. Instead, we can just have it on the same network. And again, that device enrolls into AirWatch. AirWatch pushes down a Exchange ActiveSync profile that's configured for the user on that device that says if you want your email, talk to the SEG. The SEG server is going to receive on the same network a list of users that should have access or devices. And then, of course, if they are authenticated, then the information flows from the backend email server directly to the device. We don't proxy email traffic through the AirWatch API server. So your email is not going to be sent up to the cloud and then out to the device. It stays on your premise or on the device itself. And really the whole purpose of using a secure email gateway is to protect the endpoint and also to protect your backend infrastructure, the device and your email servers. So take a look at the differences here between the SEG Classic and the SEG V2. Well, the V2 is Java-based. It's a Windows service, and it's configured in the AirWatch console. 100% of it is configured in the AirWatch console, and then you download an installer, and then you enter a little bit of information in the installer itself. It uses REST APIs to talk to AirWatch. So we talked about API support earlier. It uses REST APIs in the console, so you do have to activate those at your customer organization group first before you can install a secure email gateway. Then we also support Exchange and Office 365 mail servers. We'll have additional support for servers in the near future. Now, the classic SEG actually runs on IIS and the .NET framework. It has a post-installation configuration, meaning instead of configuring it in the console, you actually configure it after you install it on the server. We use clustering for increased resources. You can actually set up more than one SEG, have them talk to each other over port 9090, and kind of maybe have the classic secure email gateway have as much resource there as a V2. So both of these are robust, but a really big difference is the API support. The classic SEG uses a SOAP API access. It's a different type of connection to talking to the AirWatch API server. So if you're installing a classic, you'll need to know these requirements. If you're installing a new V2, you'll need to know those requirements as well. What about PowerShell? So PowerShell, this is a conversation that I usually get into a debate with customers when I give a training. So I'll have the guy in the room that, or gal that has a PowerShell configuration, and they are just thrilled to hear that I say PowerShell and that they can actually use PowerShell commands with AirWatch. And they start asking me about how it's configured on the server, and I talk about how we can quarantine devices and we can block devices from having access that are not enrolled into AirWatch. But then we get into a little bit of a debate about are PowerShell commands able to support a large deployment? So in my opinion, yes. You can still have a large deployment with PowerShell commands authenticating users into your email server. But here's the caveat. If you use a proxy or secure email gateway, you can use clustering. You can stand up many SEG servers and potentially on a large environment, maybe using 10,000 devices, 20,000 devices or more, have a better response with your email integration with a cluster of SEG servers doing all that heavy lifting instead of relying on PowerShell commands and your existing email server that's also handling all your email configurations. So just keep that in mind that we have the clustering power with the SEG. But PowerShell commands are great. If you are a PowerShell person and you are someone who is versed in configuring that on your Exchange server, we absolutely support it. And you can see here that we can discover and block unmanaged devices, we can require devices to be encrypted, and we can block compromised devices as well. We can integrate and revoke certificates for Microsoft products. And remember that PowerShell is a Microsoft product. Two things we can't do. We can't encrypt attachments, and we cannot encrypt hyperlinks either. So if you need that attachment transformation, again, you'll have to revert to a seg. Let's take a look at the flow. We have a device. We have 365 in the cloud. The device enrolls into AirWatch. AirWatch in the cloud pushes down Exchange ActiveSync profile, configured for the user on the device. It says if you want your email, talk directly to Office 365 in the cloud. On the back end, we have AirWatch. AirWatch is going to send a list of permissible devices and users through PowerShell commands encrypted to Office 365. The same server that's sending your email out is also going to do the authentication, and if that device is on the list, then it will receive email access directly from 365, and email will flow to the device in your email server, not through the AirWatch console. You can mix it up a little bit here. So take a look at this workflow. If you have a scenario where AirWatch is in the cloud and you have an Exchange server on premise, well, you might need an additional piece of hardware. So if we need to get into your internal network to send a list of permissible devices to your on-premise Exchange server, you're going to need a connector. So we can use an enterprise systems connector, but install the AirWatch Cloud Connector service. And that AirWatch Cloud Connector service can actually allow us to securely tunnel into your environment and talk to your Exchange server. And again, we do that over AirWatch Cloud Messaging, or AWCM. You just open up port 443, and we can securely send those list of commands. Now, if AirWatch is on premise and Exchange is on premise, you don't need to have an ACC or AirWatch Cloud Connector service running. They can talk to each other freely and securely. If you're using the Google model, you're going to be using the entire Google Enterprise Services, and you'll be using their email probably as well. So if you want to stand up a secure email gateway, a proxy, and connect to G Suite, you absolutely can do that. We have some features such as blocking unmanaged devices, required devices to be encrypted, or block compromised devices. Again, the attachment and the hyperlink transformation is going to be done through the seg. And if we use Google APIs, then it's going to look a little bit like this. So you don't need to stand up a server if you're using the Google APIs. You'll just log into the Google Enterprise Management console, and you'll actually grant API support to the AirWatch console. And from there, we can send a list of permissible devices and users, and when that device enrolls, it's going to talk directly to G Suite, and it will push email down to that device. So how do we set up a MIM configuration or mobile email management configuration in the console? Well, we can navigate to the configuration settings for email, and then you need to tell AirWatch what type of email management you're going to configure. Now, you should do this from your customer level because you can't nest MIM configurations underneath each other. So if you're ABC company and you need an email configuration that ends in @abc.com, then you need to set that at your company level. Because if you set it at a department level, like your sales team, well, guess what? You can't nest another email management underneath it. So go ahead and set your email management at your company level, have it for your entire company, and you would create your configuration in the console. Now, you'll tell AirWatch if you're going to use a proxy or direct integration, and then you're going to download the installer if you're using the secure email gateway. So as a review here, which email management model uses content and hyperlink transformation? So remember, that's always a secure email gateway. That is going to be a server that you stand up on your premise, a proxy, that you install from the email console in the AirWatch or the MIM configuration in the AirWatch console. And this is something that you'll have to support. You'll receive huge benefits from supporting this server because you can have a dedicated proxy to do the heavy lifting of email management. All right, so what are the pros and cons of implementing each supported email management model? Now, well, first of all, you need to think about how many email management models there are. There's two. There's a proxy, there's direct integration. So the pros of the proxy we just talked about: transformation of attachments and hyperlinks, dedicated server to do the heavy lifting that you can also cluster. Well, the cons are going to be the exact same thing. You have to support a server, you have to have that cost of having a clustered seg server running in your environment. And that could also be a little bit of a hindrance if everything else is in the cloud. If 365 is in the cloud, if AirWatch is in the cloud, why are you supporting a server on premise? So I would still use that if you need the transformation of hyperlinks and content. But just to be honest, if everything else is in the cloud, you might want to go to the pros of the PowerShell or API, Google API support. Now, the pros of direct integration with PowerShell and Google APIs are the opposite of the seg. You do not have to support a server. You do not have to have information go down to your premise, then back up to the cloud. And if you are versed in PowerShell, it can be very quick to set up. So could an organization deploy digital certificates for email authentication with an on-premise Exchange architecture? So the keyword here is on-premise. With Exchange, we support on-premise architecture for deploying certificates. So absolutely yes.